Thanks, Paul. Thank you very much. Thank you for choosing this session. BBC Sounds is 5 years old. It's an app. It's on web. It's on television. And it's smart speakers. Because often people say, oh, it's just that app thing, isn't it? It's a digital front door to our live radio stations, our range of on-demand speech, and an improving selection of on-demand music. We're going to try in this next 20 minutes, Katie and I, to not give you a dull strategy-only deck, but give you a real sense of the work under the bonnet that we've been doing in the last few months, and that we're going to try and do in the next few months. So even though I've said it's not really a big strategy deck, I'm going to start with a strategy slide. So here we go. Right, Sounds has a vision to become the UK's most loved, valued, and trusted audio product. I'll talk more about these goals, but our first goal is to protect and grow live listening. Spotify would die to have some of our radio stations. We really want to care about them and protect them. So protect and grow live listening. We want to build a world-class podcast slate that truly adds to the value of our live stations and increases our weekly reach. But what about on-demand music? Yes, Spotify and other products have a huge foothold. People happy to pay for their weekly music catalog. But we, through our brands and our presenters, think we can also win at on-demand music. In the Wild West, if you like, of podcast RSS and internet, what's the value of trusted content, particularly around news and local? So I'll talk more about that. We work very closely with colleagues in product, and we have, if you like, stolen a way of working that product do. Some of you may be used to quarterly OKRs. OKRs are effectively short-term mission statements of the O's. They're the objectives. And we set key results in a quarter. So for example, at the moment, we've set, in the last quarter, key results to deliver on the football season, which is massive at the moment in the UK, on Radio 2, which has some big events going on, and on some big returning podcasts. So we think with radical focus each quarter how we can graft a bit of marginal gain growth. It's the summer of Glastonbury, the Euros, the Olympics, big live events are a massive part of our story. We work with BBC Studios. They're the commercial arm of the business. And in the overall BBC strategy, increasing commercial revenue in addition to the license fee is important. So we particularly think with studios how we might maximize our podcast revenue outside the UK. In fact, today we've just done a deal with Amazon that will bring in money to BBC Studios for them to have some of our podcasts ad-free on Amazon globally. So we think long and hard commercially with our colleagues in studios. And obviously, you can't do anything without a great working culture. When I first came into Sounds, I felt there was a culture in product, a culture in marketing, a culture in editorial. We tried to bind it together into one working team, as kind of shown by our example of listening and learning from the way product think about those quarterly OKRs. Our product team think about life through those 4 pillars. So our engineers think about 4 lots of work, if you like. Are they working to improve live? So whether that's improving our live radio dial, are they working to improve delivery of on-demand speech and music? Are they working hard to get us on every platform, whether that be gaming platforms, Sonos, improving the experience on Alexa? And are they thinking about making the Sounds experience more personalized and easy to use? So we said we're 5 years old. We have we're just over now 5 million weekly users. And while Sounds isn't hyper-personalized, there are basically 5 million different versions of Sounds, depending who you are. In some form, that version of Sounds you have has an element of personalization that makes it different from someone else. So I wouldn't describe it as hyper-personalized, because I don't think that is our job in the BBC, but it is to create a for me experience that means that you want to stay with Sounds and make it sticky. So that essentially is our strategy on a page, and I'll just delve into some more details about the work we're doing. So if we move on to the next one. Here's the numbers. So when Sounds launched and when me and Katie started, and purely not just down to us, obviously, although we've been in there 4 years, Sounds was about 1.2 million weekly users. We've worked really hard to push that up. Growth is not easy. It comes with, as we talked about, radical focus, big ideas to get that number up to 5.1 million. We would love that number to be 10 million in 5 years' time. we kind of think that's the kind of growth we need to create in our digital product to offset the linear radio decline. So we're at 5.1 million. We're aspiring to reach 10 million in 5 years' time. We're currently growing at about 9% a year. The mathematicians amongst you will realize that growing at 9% will not get us to 10 million. So we've got to work out together with product, editorial, and marketing how we increase the rate of digital growth beyond where we are now. Of that 5.1 million, 3 million are weekly listening to the app, 1.4 million are on Amazon Alexa, 1.1 million are on web, and about 150,000 are watching on a TV app, a Sounds TV app. So that's the numbers. Right, on-demand speech. So, of which podcast is part of on-demand speech in our language. What does success look like for us? We have a strong spine of podcasts, and we want to make sure they grow. I think we very much in the last year have been doing what many people do and rolling out new title after new title, probably to an unsustainable level. We want to go back to basics a bit and really look after the spine of our top 20, top 30 podcasts. So part one of our strategy is what we've already got big, are we looking after it? Are we still spending as much time and care and attention on Newscast, which is Britain's biggest daily news podcast, on Football Daily, which is Britain's biggest sports daily podcast? The second thing is if we are a tour de force at anything, it's factual podcast content. But the challenge there is to be creatively clever. So Things Fell Apart with John Ronson, I think takes factual storytelling to the next level. That's had 2 million plays in about 8 weeks. That's the kind of success we look at from our big titles. Uncanny is kind of factual meets spooky horror content. Murder They Wrote is kind of comedy meets true crime. All the time pushing the boundaries at factual content to see where we can go to. One of the big changes, and we have just launched 2 more entertaining titles. If you were to say, if factual is our tour de force, where are we on more pure entertainment titles? Not as strong. We've just launched in the last week with big name personalities in the UK, Miss Me, which is a title with Lily Allen and Makita Oliver, and we have some leading actresses in the UK doing a podcast about television called Off the Telly. So whilst we want to keep the top 20 strong, keep creating factual, which is our kind of tour de force, but be stronger in an entertainment space where we've been a bit thin. With studios, we have co-invested on some projects. We've just launched a podcast called Good Bad Billionaire. We look at USA spin-offs of some of our British titles. And yeah, we're always looking for new releases. Our aim there is we think the 3 letters of BBC are too quiet and not noisy enough in the US market. That comes with us having to change our tactics. It will include BBC Studios investing in marketing money to make sure we can be a bigger presence in the American market. But we're probably not as healthy and strong in that market as we should be. BBC is obviously not just audio, it's television and audio. Traitors Uncloaked is what we call TV Plus strategy. The Traitors, massive TV hit, kind of surprising from nowhere TV hit. Traitors Uncloaked was not only, if you like, the visual sister sidekick program on television, it was also a podcast. So kind of a 3-way win around a massive piece of BBC IP. So we're looking to see, and that was produced by an indie production company, not by BBC Production. So that's an interesting tactic we want to keep exploring. So we on Sounds have content that we commission, but we also license a small amount of content from independent program makers. So people whose content might be making advertising money for them on Apple or Spotify, we pay small licensing fees and for ad-free versions of those podcasts on our platform. The reason why we do it, we believe in curating the best of British talent. We believe that is something these podcasts don't necessarily get from a Spotify front door or Apple. And some of these titles, particularly in the history genre, Real Dictators, Bad Women, have done incredible value. We talked earlier about John Ronson getting 2 million plays in 8 weeks. I think the Real Dictators titles have 1 million plays. That will have cost us a fraction of the money because we've licensed a podcast that already exists, and it will have contributed to our history genre being turbocharged in Sounds. So that's an important point to make because it's not something that many other, if any other public service broadcasters have done on their own platforms, is license non-commissioned content, bringing it in, and obviously without its adverts on, but therefore curating not just BBC content, but some of the best of the rest. We also, 2 or 3 years ago, got slightly bored with the likes of big tech companies launching brand new talent schemes with a big fanfare, and then they kind of disappear. They don't actually stay true to their word and follow through on big talent schemes. So we launched Audiolab, where we basically pay for at least 4 or 5 creators to have a job with us for 6 months and make their first ever podcast series. We try and find people from diverse backgrounds who wouldn't otherwise have a place with the BBC, and we've won awards for Best New Podcast in the UK for some of these titles. So that is one way of us working with the sector and bringing new voices in to BBC Sounds. Because often we could get criticised for there's a whole new slate of celebrity podcasts in an entertainment space, but in the breadth and depth of the overall offer, there's absolutely diversity of voice and talent coming right through. It's not just based on celebrities. Obviously, that is where some of the revenue goes on the entertainment space, but the breadth of what we do is critical. Right, let's move on briefly. That's just a flavor of the titles that most appeal to light listeners. It's mostly in a factual and sport area. You'll see some of them are radio programs like Woman's Hour, which is huge on the radio, but also does a huge job on demand. 5 Minutes On is an interesting, literally 5 minutes a day of audio, the best of something that's happened on BBC News, curated in a podcast. So it's just a quick snapshot that doesn't tend to be like a habit builder, but normally if it's a topic of great interest, it's a crime story or the budget or something major, it might hook you in and you listen to that episode. So again, some of it's experimentation, some of it is tried and tested radio programs, and a blend of stuff there can appeal to light listeners. On-demand music. On the next slide, sorry, Katie. On-demand music, the spine, obviously this is an interesting space. This is in on-demand speech. We're quite fortunate in the UK. By launching Sounds when we did, we are currently the second biggest platform, just behind Spotify, for podcast consumption in the UK. That's almost the only market in the world where there is a, if you like, native app from a broadcaster that competes so highly with the likes of Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Obviously, music's a different story. Like, it's a dominated space by people wanting their music catalog, but we still need to work our way through it and find much-loved habit in on-demand music. We do that through these strategies. Our radio stations have big events. Radio 1 Big Weekend will have great on-demand content. So will a Six Music Festival. Glastonbury, an even bigger event. How do we maximize the sets and the on-demand packaging of a big event like Glastonbury? Our radio stations also supply us with weekly much-loved on-demand treats. So Radio 1 Happy, Radio 2 90s, Radio 3 Ultimate Calm. So if you like, on-demand extensions of our much-loved music stations. We then have mood-based shows, the Sleeping Forecast. Pacesetter is a perfect companion if you're training for the marathon. They are a flavor of the things we do. We also believe there's a space around storytelling. So we've had series about the Beatles. We've got a series about to come out about Coldplay. Again, that's a space we think the BBC should be winning in. So put that together, and we are trying to grow on-demand music to the tune of 5 to 10% a year. We've managed to put 5% growth on in the last few months, the first bit of green shoots in this territory. This requires really real focus. Like, we have a very long tail of on-demand music. Like, 10 titles do probably 70% of the consumption in this space. So for anyone thinking in the on-demand music space, small, few, big bets, well promoted is the kind of way through that we found. And some of those titles are on the next slide that you'll see here. That's just a flavor of some of the titles that cut through. As I said, there are not many other titles beyond this. These do the heavy lifting for us. Okay, let's move on and talk about live radio. Live radio, our major growth for Sounds will come from podcast surge and doing what we can to protect and grow live radio listening. On-demand music won't be to the same extent contributing to that big growth that we need. How are we going to get there? We think about genres. We think about, we've already hinted at it, massive music events. Imagine Glastonbury and several streams of Glastonbury coming out from your Sounds app. To date, we haven't really maximized music events and live the way we want to. There's other real hygiene need states that protect live radio. Now, we, like many others in live speech, have seen a small decline. There are things like big football matches or big news events. We even have what I thought was a fairly boring budget day in the UK, where the Chancellor talks about all the economic stuff for the year ahead. Even that adds an extra few percent on our live speech stations that week. Big news events and sport matters and makes a significant difference. We've also announced recently that we want to bolster our dedicated live music stream offer. So in Sounds, this is regulation permitting, we would like to launch these this summer. They are a bigger and better version of Radio 1 Dance that we launched, a further Radio 1 extension that plays tracks from the last 20 years, a Radio 2 extension aimed at a slightly older audience, music from 50s, 60s, and 70s, and a kind of calming version of Radio 3. So again, we've taken our biggest brands and thought, what are the clever sister stations we can do off that, and we will put them into Sounds first. The plan ultimately, again, subject to a much longer regulatory program, so maybe that would be at least a year away, is that the Radio 1 Dance, the new Radio 1 extension, the new Radio 2, and new Radio 3, we would like to hope they would be on DAB+ radio next year, as well as on Sounds. But the first step for us is a lighter regulatory process that hopefully allows us to launch them in July. We think we need a bit more turbocharging around the need states and specific needs states around music and sounds, and we think that will give us a bit of a leg up. Right, next slide is, I'm going to talk briefly about product, because I am not a software engineer, even though I've learned to work really closely with software engineers and product culture. Putting it very simply, BBC has had like a vertical strategy around products. iPlayer for television, Sounds for audio, BBC News, BBC Sport, BBC Children's. We've built products with different tech for different products. That means, at the moment, if you love a BBC TV program, we can't very easily learn about you to send you on your audio journeys. So this year is the start of a different kind of strategy from product. There will not be individual Sounds roadmaps, iPlayer roadmaps, news roadmaps. There'll be one product roadmap this year that solely starts by thinking about improving search and the recommendation engine. So you could imagine, and the recommendation will first appear on the Sounds product out of the BBC products, one recommendation engine that knows where you live, what TV programs you watch, what news articles you read, so that we can surface really beautiful for me content in your rail. So that is where much of our focus will be. It's quite scary, because if you like, that's the invisible bit of growth. When we launch new music streams or launch new podcasts, we can have a bit more confidence about that's going to surge us up in growth. These are, if you like, the invisible but critical enabling functions of product that I'm sure many in the room will recognize. We haven't got the resources of the likes of Spotify and their vast amount of engineers, but we need to focus on the enabling functions. We need to care about this stuff as much as we do creating our linear radio schedules, because our future depends on being stronger at it in the next couple of years. So that is a flavor of the strategy from colleagues in product. Right, let's move on to Katie, my head of curation, who I stole from colleagues in BBC Children's. When I joined Sounds, I realized at the start I needed to have an expert in content strategy, so I found the best audience planner who was good at that. I wanted someone who was expert at content discovery, not content making, because I hadn't got a clue. And I brought Mary in, who was Barack Obama's digital editor when he won his first election. And I wanted someone brilliant who cared about curation. And that's where Katie comes in.
Thank you. So, before I start, who here has gone to a streaming service to watch something good in the evening, and you get there and you can't find something to watch? You're overwhelmed with choice. Yeah, me too. You're not alone, but you keep on scrolling, and then you can't find anything, and you might go to another streaming service, and you keep on scrolling, and then you panic because you spent half an hour scrolling. So you end up either going to something and make a panic decision and something that's not quite right and not quite for you, or you end up going to something that's familiar and safe and you've watched 100 times. So that's where you're not alone, because discovery is one of our single biggest challenges, helping our content be discovered by people. Now, the best way to recommend content is person to person. Jono tells me, I listen to this great podcast. I'll go and listen. I trust his decision. but there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that personal discovery happens. So we think a lot about discovery, and there's two themes I'm going to talk about. One is collaboration, and one is about audiences. So collaboration is the teams working together, whether it's a launch, an event, a product development. And the audiences, it's how we get the audiences to discover the content that they love. So for the audience-facing bit, curation. Now, audiences come and expect personalization. They want it, they expect it. But we're the BBC. We have a public service remit to meet. So we have to do this by a perfect blend of human curation and personalization. Now, I don't know if this is going to work. Yay. So the most important thing, top of the rail, is the live radio networks. They are curated, of course, catering to each and every different audience need, state, and taste. We have continued listening. You jump back into what you were listening to. That's personalization. We have our hero banner. We'll scroll up to it in a minute, but that's our big dynamic banner that pops up when there's something really important. This is the bit, the highlights, the Six Music Festival highlights. That's humanly curated, calling out the biggest, most important thing that's happening. And then we have algatorial rails. This is new for us. We have one for speech and one for music. And so this is where humans meet the algorithm. So it's hand-picked content sorted by the algorithm, offering a unique view to each and every single audience member. And we only got there through collaboration. Now that's working with the product teams and the data scientists, and them understanding that human editorial judgment comes from centuries of data that we've been trained on, of real life experiences, those cues, and that's the human in the loop. Then we have a recommended for you rail, that's purely personalized, and we have local rails, which depends on where you are in the country, the content that you're served, and that again is a blend. You've got journalists and digital experts creating content from the heart of those communities. And we have a news playlist. That is all humanly curated. And that repurposes news from across the BBC, but we'll talk more about that later. So the next bit is metadata. Now, I feel like metadata is having its day. You know, it's finally being taken seriously. And the reason why is that audiences need to find more of what they love. And they do that by good metadata. They need it when they're searching on our platform, on our partners' platforms, on Google. They need it when they're browsing, when they're in that hunting mode, you know, scrolling through, trying to find content across topics and categories, and it's there, the metadata in the descriptions and the signposting. And we also need metadata for good personalization. More of what you like, near to you, recommended for you. Broadcast is also, accurate metadata is also so important for program making, for linear playout, for EPGs and archive, and for licensing and payaway obligations. And data and product need good metadata to build better algorithms, more accurate audience segmentation, and this increased automation means that we can free up humans to do more of that innovation that's really, really important to drive us forward. And it's being taken seriously. So the BBC's main metadata focus this year, as Jono was talking about, is implementing a common metadata framework from all of that BBC content, allowing us to realize these advantages across all of the BBC's content and services. And another good way of finding content is, if the slide moves, social. Yeah, so this is a really dull slide because my social team were obviously making really good enchanting social content that they didn't have time to build me a good slide. But ultimately, social is about building fandom, fostering community, and creating that fear of missing out, that FOMO. And as you probably all know in this room, that audio isn't necessarily a visual-first medium. But we address this by visualizing some of our podcasts, putting cameras in studios, and social-first content that builds on the success of the shows. We work with big-name guests and artists. We collaborate with them to reach those audience members, those superfans. We generate that fear of missing out. So we had a big charity event, Comic Relief, the other week. Molly King, presenter, Radio 1 presenter, Saturday's pop star. She cycled across the country, and between the linear network and the social media team, they created this real part of the community, this fear of missing out. You wanted to be with Molly, and you wanted her to succeed, and she helped raise over £1 million. That's probably grown by now. And we build on those communities. So social media can be quite a nasty place sometimes, but if you go to the Radio 2 Instagram account, it's so warm, it's so welcoming, you want to be part of that community. And then you go to a Radio 2 event in real life, and those people in real life are still there, being warm and fun and enjoying themselves. And the important thing is that we are where the audience are at. We're on TikTok and we're on Instagram. And then news, transforming news. When news breaks, you probably hear about it on social, but after that, the audiences come to the BBC and public service providers, importantly. And that's because radio can get there quicker. But we built a news playlist a couple of years ago, but in the last few weeks, we put it onto the homepage, and that is because it makes it more discoverable. We've made a better UX. We can link through to a news category page, which we never had before, where we can curate and put things together in themes. We know audiences come for a story. And so what we do is we hook them in with the story by optimizing our metadata. We use engaging images, headlines as descriptions, and then we hook them into the playlist. And we know this is really important. It's going to be a big news year with like half the world going into general election, voting in elections across the world. And public service radio is the trusted source, and we need to be there. But also, I'm going to just play you a little bit of, hopefully if this plays, just to so you can have a look at the UX and just see what we've been doing.
The sentence given to a man who stabbed to death 3 people in Nottingham is to be referred to the Court of Appeal. Valdo Calacane was given an indefinite hospital.
So this is all about whether Fujitsu, the company that ran the Post Office's Horizon IT system, could remotely tinker with sub-postmasters' branch accounts without their knowledge. And this is crucial because...
But we know it's about getting the balance right. We know some people don't want the news and they come to Sounds for escapism. So this takes us back to collaboration, how we work with the news team, how we work with Sounds, how we work with product. And guess what? This is a complex slide, but the BBC is complex. We interact with all of these teams. So if I take about Six Music Festival that we had the other week, we worked with the network, who knew who their audience were, what the priorities were. We worked with the social team, who created that fear of missing out, the community, reaching that Six Music audience. We worked with the on-demand and music and events team, who thought about those onward journeys, how to listen again and watch again on Sounds and on iPlayer. The curation team carved out space amongst all the competing activities, such as a big activating boxing match. And the local rail amplified that this event was happening in Manchester. The data scientists gave my team the ability to override the algorithm so that this big, important public service thing that the BBC is doing, we could make sure got to everybody. The metadata team made sure it was searchable, so when Six Music said, go and search it on sounds, you could find it. Marketing created the promo, the out-of-home promotion, the push notifications, the emails, reaching different audiences, and comms placed interviews. They built the hype. So digital transformation is really hard. And it takes a superhuman effort to transform this 100-year-old business, but we do it via collaboration and thinking about the audience.
So thanks for listening, guys. Just a couple of nuggets on detail underneath what Katie was saying about metadata. So recently, we just put some words explaining what each of our radio stations were doing beyond the radio station itself in the top dial. Tests on the website showed 2% increase in total hours if we transferred that to app. So that's the kind of thing where attention to detail on metadata doesn't sound much, but 2% increase overnight on one product change is kind of game-changing work. So that's it from us, guys. And we are happy to answer. We've left it 7 minutes for questions. Happy to answer any questions that you need.
I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much for that. That's a wealth of information, and I know we all had a lunch, but it was a lot to digest. Something that kind of caught me was the element of human curation versus, we'll say, the algorithm, or maybe just working with the algorithm. That's something that I thought was really quite interesting.
So I think working with the product teams and the data scientists, we met loads and talked through, and they would do something and show us it, and we go, not quite right, take it away. But it was like having one destination in the distance, and one of us would be taking the scenic route there, and one's going down the Autobahn with no speed limit. But we got there by sort of collaborating, meeting together and going, yeah, that's right, we've got it. And I feel like I did a brilliant example. I went around all the network heads and went, right, the personalization is right. Tell me what you've got in the rail. The One Extra team said, yeah, it's all One Extra content. Alid and Radio 1 went, yeah, it's all Radio 1 content. I was like, we've got it. We've got it right.
It's working. All right, well, we'd love to hear if there are any questions. We have a few minutes. We started late, so we're going to take a few minutes for questions if anybody's got them. I know we've got volunteers on the sides. I need to do this. Have I got a hand up anywhere? John or Katie, can you see anyone?
Yeah, there's one.
Yes, there's one right at the back there in the red jumper. Have I got a volunteer with a microphone?
I already got a mic.
Okay, and if you could tell us where you are from and your name.
Yo, guys.
Ah, okay.
I'm Bert. I'm from Estonia. Basically, the Estonia's BBC. So, Jonathan, you started out with you'd like to see BBC Sounds hit 10 million in whatever years. But is that number coming from your top brass, or is it something you want to see as the boss of BBC Sounds? And what happens if you don't hit that?
Okay, well, the trick is pick a date a few years out, right? And then people may forget about it in the meantime. In truth, obviously, we are an ambitious team that set motivating goals. We set up a target of 5 million. It's more than that, though. Looking at the pace of linear decline, that is the kind of figure we need to hit to protect BBC Audio in about 2029, 2030. Like, us nudging towards 6 million won't be good enough. Like, we know that habits are changing, audience demands are changing. Like, the very least we can do is gradually increase the rate of growth. That is the only game in town. It comes with pressure. It comes with, absolutely, we've got to work hand in hand with our product colleagues to get there. I am truly hoping that those big product enabling functions that we talked about will give us the springboard in the next year or two. Because in truth, where should our reach come from? People who consume BBC News every day, people who consume BBC iPlayer that haven't got an audio habit. That is, if you like, the first win that we should be maximizing. And that's hopefully where we'll get to. So it's a mixture of our team ambition and probably what we'll have to do for the business in the next few years.
And keep pushing it on without cannibalizing yourself, hopefully.
Exactly.
Okay, have we got another hand up? Now the lights are on, we can see a little bit better. Yeah, I've got someone in the back there. Here, just in the back row on the stalls on the ground.
To do
No,
the
I think it's
old-fashioned
gone on.
shout really loud.
You could just shout really loudly if you wanted to. Yeah. Shout.
Just about. On what social media video clips was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you do it?
How
Tell us
did you
tell
get
us
Can we
how.
start? Or?
Yeah.
No, you go. Go on.
I was like, well, I mean, it was really recognizing that social media is a profession, right? So it's not just someone who's a bit handy on their phones. It is a profession. You're getting people who work in social media to deliver it. So it's really focusing our energy on where the audience is. So for us, it's TikTok, it's Instagram.
So what we did last year was the team came and they report back every year on their numbers. Last year, rather than just do that, I challenged them and they challenged themselves. What do we most need to do to deliver game-changing numbers in the next year? That included huge focus on TikTok and Instagram and a lot less on X, a lot less on Facebook, for example. So we then did that. We then invested a little bit more resource in the team. I think there's one great thing about social is you get great data on a weekly basis and you can learn from it. So for us, it's about investing in that central team. We prioritize better. The single best number, we increased Radio 2's visual clips by 400% in a year, just because of a clear strategy. Like, it's the same people, but we had a strategy and different prioritization.
Okay, I think we've time for one last question, if anybody has one. In the front here, Miss, you're a volunteer.
You can definitely shout out.
Lady here with the glasses. All the way at the front. Yeah, that lady there. Sorry, Peter, you're not getting a question. No.
Maybe we
No.
No, go on.
Take your time.
So hi, I'm from Portugal. I work for the biggest media group, private media group there, with a TV station, newspaper, streaming service, and also podcasts. I'd like to know, we are talking here about human curating things, but I'm very interested in AI, and I would like to know if you are doing things with AI voices and AI anyway, and what is the biggest challenge for the next month and years?
So we're not piloting anything using voices at the moment. We are piloting carefully, as you'd expect the BBC to do. The first wins will be how do we maximize value from existing content? So for example, BBC News translating into 150 languages at pace. Football commentaries on the radio, how can you use the text of the commentary also on your BBC Sport written website? So that's one. Then how do you experiment? It might be a experiment with how you can interact with the BBC bite-sized learning app would be something where we'd look at using AI. Then you then get into an interesting space about time saving, where again, we'll test some things out carefully. Could it deliver headlines at pace for you from written text? You know, can it speed up ways of working? We are carefully piloting through those 2 or 3 places in the next 6 months. But we're not rushing to anything where my voice is being replaced on a podcast, not that I present a podcast, but you know what I mean. We're being quite careful in the first 6 months.
Fantastic, thank you. I mean, very rich offer. I mean, let's get you back in a couple of years and see how you're doing and see how
Well,
you're
the
going.
numbers.
Yes, check on your numbers. Absolutely, we need to hold the BBC to account. Jonathan Wall, Kate Tully, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So, short break here in track 1. Next, we're going to have an AI session. One person saying AI is amazing, the other person saying AI is the devil incarnate. Do not touch it. So our AI debate in here in 10 minutes. Other choices, of course, in tracks 2, 3, and 4. See you in 10 minutes. Thank you.